Good evening and thank you for joining us. We are entering the season for holiday celebrations. A joyous time for most of us, but a painful reminder of who's missing for the friends and families of those lost to crime in our community. The best way to help that hurt, closure. Yet tonight, the Spotlight asks, where's the justice? As we reveal how so few get that closure when it comes to homicide cases. Across our region, the gap between crime and conviction can be a wide one, as seen in the latest FBI data available. This first chart shows the homicide investigations reported by the Seattle Police Department. Of the 41 cases opened last year, 10 of them were cleared, a 24% clearance rate, and that's down 6% from the year before. In Tacoma, 30 homicides, 16 cleared. That's better, but still only about a 50-50 chance of closure. Of our major metros, Everett did the best on paper. 4 cases, 3 clearances, but that was last year. This year, Everett Police Chief Dan Templeman has said his city is on track for 16 deaths because of crime, 4 times the caseload. In fact, all 3 cities expect to end 2022 with a record or near record number of homicides, even as they experience crippling staff shortages. Well, sometimes the split in justice served between the haves and have-nots is particularly stark, and such was the case back in 2015 in the city of Long Beach, Washington. That year, the police department reported just 2 cases of violent crime to the FBI database. 1 case was cleared. This is the story of the case that was not.
There's been more than one time when we felt that they were kind of hoping we would die and go away.
To say that Keith and Lori Beach have shown the patience of Job might even be a bit of an understatement.
To date, we've been through 2 different sheriffs and 3 different prosecutors.
Their 36-year-old son from Auburn, Jeff Beach, was in Long Beach for a softball tournament on July 4th weekend in 2015 when he was brutally beaten. He was airlifted to Portland where he died.
We just assumed that they would do their job and would want to solve this case. And so we just kind of sat back and let them have their space to get it done.
With no arrest in their son's murder, that patience is at an end.
You know, we're just wanting closure. We're honest people. We've told them we're honest people, and we just want to know what happened.
They both feel that the sheriff's office has misled them, lied to them, and even misplaced key evidence.
We've been asked by other law enforcement professionals during the time that we've been going through Jeff's case whether or not we believe that there's some incompetence or corruption going on. And from our perspective, maybe both.
Time and time again, he says their requests for information have been denied as they try to find out what happened and why.
If mistakes were made in the investigation, if delays were done, I mean, we're 7 years later. If people that hurt and killed Jeff have had 7 more years to hurt and kill other people.
Detectives have always believed the suspects involved live in the Vancouver, Washington area. Beacon Plumbing owner Bill Cahill even funded 4 Crime Stoppers billboards there, offering a $36,000 cash reward.
There might be people connected to the case that were involved that have changed their allegiance. They've made a decision that the people that they're hiding aren't really worth $36,000.
That's a lot of motivation, but to this point, any tips that came in have not panned out. Now, Keith and Lori say they feel like the victims.
To date, they have still refused, to let Jeff's autopsy be released to family.
Keith says his son's murder is not a case of whodunit. He says he's been told that follow-up interviews with possible witnesses or others who have information haven't been completed. In an email, Pacific County Prosecutor Michael Rothman told me he understands the family's frustration. It remains an open and active investigation, and that the prosecutor's office is working with the sheriff's office to move the case forward. So if investigators are having a hard time getting people to talk to them, there is a solution. Cloyd Steiger worked as a homicide detective for the Seattle Police Department for 22 years. I first met him in 2012 when he investigated the murder of Patrick Fleming, a 70-year-old Navy veteran killed for his coin collection. Steiger caught the couple who murdered Fleming and estimates he's had an 85 to 90% solve rate during his career.
Under Washington state law, what tools do prosecutors have to be able to compel some testimony?
Well, there's a system set up in Washington called an inquiry judge proceeding. It's basically the closest thing the state of Washington has to a grand jury, but it's not in front of a jury, it's in front of an individual judge. And a prosecutor, it's a secret hearing. The prosecutor, just like a grand jury, You subpoena the witnesses to come in there. They're compelled, they're sworn in, compelled to answer. But in order for it to work, they have to be serious. If the people refuse to answer, or you know they're lying, you have to threaten them with arrest.
Steiger says the inquiry judge proceeding was used successfully in the conviction of Martin Pang, who set a fire that killed 4 firefighters in Seattle.
But maybe because they think they're so far into this that we say we can't do it now because we'll look bad. No, you won't. You'll look great. If you go now and say, "Well, we didn't probably do everything we could have before, but we're going to do it now," you will look fantastic.
Something for newly elected Pacific County Sheriff Daniel Garcia to consider when he takes office.
I feel like we're maybe getting another chance to get someone that wants to help us and realizes that we are not going to go away and we can find resources to help.
For his part, Keith has tried to remain hopeful, and while his optimism has faded, his determination has not.
I've been told several times by different law enforcement folks that if it was them, that if it was their son that was murdered the night that Jeff was murdered, that there's no way that they would be as patient as we have been, and they'd be pounding on people's desks for answers and action. We just want that justice, but we can't sit back anymore.
Much of their frustration is with the current sheriff, Robin Souvenir. Keith says he made commitment after commitment to them that Jeff Beach's murder was a priority, but didn't follow through, even though he said he wanted to be personally involved. We reached out to Sheriff Souvenir to hear his side and to ask for an update on the case, but have not heard back. As for the possibility of utilizing that inquiry judge proceeding, Pacific County Prosecutor Michael Rothman says he is considering using it to lock in the testimony of witnesses. He has assigned a deputy prosecutor to prepare the paperwork, but cautions it's not a panacea, and compelled testimony without corroboration is of very limited value. Plus, it can't be used to interview a suspect. If you have any information to help the Pacific County Sheriff's Department solve this case, please contact them or submit an anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers. We will continue to follow the progress of the case right here on the Spotlight. It makes no difference whether a son was murdered 7 years ago or more recently. The feeling of loss grows no less. But as the Spotlight's Jamie Tompkins found out, agony can lead to action. She introduces us to 2 moms who shared the same pain after gun violence took their sons. Now they share the same mission.
Connor Dassa Holland and Adriel Webb, both 18-year-olds, shot and killed in Seattle just 2 months apart in 2020. Surveillance video captured the sounds of gunfire that took Connor's life in front of his home on Mother's Day. His killer has never been caught.
Living in the community that we live in, it's like, who is it?
The suspect who murdered Adriel at a gas station at 23rd and Cherry is also unknown. The future Highline College student was shot 11 times.
I am at times angered and saddened by the fact that the murderer of my son is still out on the streets because he can still hurt someone else.
Now, Adriel's mom, Shalani Barnett, and Connor's mom, Alicia Dassa Holland, are turning their pain into purpose. This year, the 2 friends co-founded the first chapter of the Parents of Murdered Children in Washington State.
We want the parents that are here in Washington State that suffer from the loss of murdered children to know that they aren't alone.
It's a sisterhood with 6 members so far.
Whether it's through our Mothers Impacted by Gun Violence group, or whether it's through our personal relationships, or putting this chapter together, I think the thing that I found the most healing is seeing the strength of the other people that were around that are in the same situation.
They have big plans. POMC is already working with the city of Seattle on a gap analysis about which services are needed for families of murder victims. They've created a pamphlet to be handed out by detectives and social workers at Harborview as well. It includes information they didn't have on resources, financial support, and counseling.
We just don't want anyone to feel how we felt ever again.
The goal is to put the information online for every community statewide.
I am hopeful because I'm a part of a group that will bring change.
The kind of change to uplift other families just like their own, and the kind of support to uplift each other as they wait for justice.
As positive of a light as we are taking this, I mean, there are definite days of anger and sadness.
For more information on both of their sons' murders, go to our website, fox13seattle.com. And if you have any information to help identify the killers, please submit an anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers of Puget Sound. Up next, a message to everyone in Seattle who's lost a loved one to an unsolved crime. We're getting it directly from Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz, who spoke exclusively to the Spotlight. It's fairly common for detectives to tell families of homicide victims not to talk to the media. I get it. They're trying to protect the integrity of their case. But when months go by and the case hasn't been resolved, I get heartbreaking emails like the one I got last week from the mother of Gibson Moore, pleading for help, worried that their loved one's murder isn't a priority anymore. Well, tonight she tells the Spotlight's AJ Janavel she wishes she'd spoken up sooner.
On Wednesday, April 20th, Kate Coleman got the worst news imaginable.
He was my son. There's nothing more important than that.
Now, 7 months later, this mom still waits for answers.
There's so much crime in Seattle that I feel like it's just getting buried further under all the crime.
Seattle police say around 12:30 in the morning, outside an apartment complex on South Main Street, 23-year-old Gibson Moore tried to break up a fight. The kind act would cost him his life.
Nothing's good for me. I've lost joy in everything, really.
Coleman tells me she realizes the friendship she had with her son was unique.
And I was honored that he would even want to hang out with us.
That's what makes losing her son and friend so hard. A loss that has affected so many others.
As soon as I heard those gunshots and he looked at me, that's all I can remember.
Tawny Cross was Gibson's girlfriend. She was there the night he was killed.
Not a day goes by that I don't replay that night in my head and that I don't see his shooter's face in my head. It's very frustrating to see this person and have such a clear visual and not know who they are.
Seattle police say these suspects grabbed Gibson from behind, threw him to the ground, then shot and killed him.
And he could still be here. But this coward had to kill him.
You're looking at surveillance pictures released from Seattle police in October, about 6 months after the murder. Coleman says at the start of the investigation, detectives asked her not to share her story.
Well, I would have rather this been done early on, right after it happened. Maybe someone would have seen something or a witness would have come forward. I don't know where this person is. They could be long gone by now. So I think that when it was fresh, there could have been more done.
Coleman says despite the months going by, she remains hopeful.
As long as he's out there, he can be found somehow.
She asks anyone with information to call police. And Crime Stoppers is offering a reward in this case of up to $1,000 for information that leads to an arrest.
That they've taken so much from so many people. And they don't deserve to be free.
Reporting in Seattle for the Spotlight, AJ Janavel.
Gibson's mom could definitely be a member of the Parents of Murdered Children group we told you about earlier in the broadcast. One honorary member is Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz, and Jamie Tompkins is back after speaking with Chief Diaz. What does he tell you about his message for these frustrated families?
So he realizes that these families need support, and not just from these local groups of people coming together, but also from the Seattle Police Department. And that is why he's trying to create a special position just to fill that need.
Because I've been meeting with the families, I really wanted to develop a family support liaison position. I've actually been in conversations with what that would look like with some of the mothers. That is one of the things, this is a suggestion that they thought, could be done. And right now our detectives are going sometimes, they're putting everything they can into those cases, but they're not able to spend that little extra time with the family. And so having some sort of person that can liaison with families, that it would be so valuable just to have that connection and being able to do some follow-up and different little items that I think the families could really appreciate in the midst of what's going on.
Chief Diaz says detectives are hard at work learning every aspect of the victim in each case. And they're going through records like phone records, messages, emails, trying to find clues and bring closure to the families. He says they work countless hours, but at the end of the day, all the families really want is justice.
I wanted to know that it matters to me, that these cases matter to me, their child matters to me, that everyone has a story. It's really about humanizing each other. It's really about trying to make sure that that we know that their life was cut down short, and that that their memory isn't lost. And so, for me, it's important for me to be involved with the family, be engaged. I spent my career, focusing my efforts on youth violence, and I've watched a number of deaths over, the course of my, career. But I also, even just growing up, I also lost good friends to violence, to senseless violence. And so I always wanted to make sure that I was going to end up, working with families, and they need to know that their police chief is, cares and values to make sure that there is justice, for their family.
And so one thing that a lot of people don't know is he actually reports to 90% of the homicides within the city. And that's whether it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the middle of the morning. He does that because he wants to be there with his officers for this investigation, but also he wants to be with the families who oftentimes report to the scene.
Yeah, having the top cop there definitely sends a message that their cases matter. Jamie, thank you. Still to come, families pleading for something to be thankful for this holiday season: justice. The victims, a father, a teen, and a child. After 2 decades, we're learning new information about a murder that happened Thanksgiving night in Tacoma. Detectives now think that shooting may have been gang-related. In 2002, someone fired into a home, hitting 4 people. 2 of the victims, 19-year-old Kimberly Riley and 5-year-old Jeremy, were killed. Detectives say a man was seen leaving the area in a light-colored bulky jacket, as well as a pickup with a canopy. But that information never led to identifying a suspect. Detectives now think that someone at the house may have had former gang ties, and they hope after all these years that someone will come forward and help bring closure to the family.
There were 2 people completely innocent, completely uninvolved in any of the gang lifestyle, or that didn't do anything to deserve it. They deserve to be living right now. And it's not fair for their lives to have been taken. So I think that maybe somebody will think about that. Maybe somebody since then has had children and thinks about it a little bit differently. And maybe this will be the wake-up call that they need to bring forth information.
If you have any information on this case, contact Tacoma Police directly or submit an anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers of Tacoma Pierce County. You can call 1-800-222-TIPS. The family of a man shot and killed in Tacoma around Thanksgiving in 2020 is also speaking out and asking for closure. 55-year-old Gregory Evans was gunned down while standing outside his friend's car the night of November 27th. Surveillance video shows the suspects drive up, fire a gun, and then speed off. Detectives with Tacoma Police say they've been chasing every lead since. But lately, no one's been talking, and Gregory's case has gone cold. Now his daughter is calling on the community for help.
Let the streets talk. So it's time to talk. Open up, please.
Detectives say so far their investigation shows that Gregory had no issues, no enemies, and it's possible his death could be a case of mistaken identity. His friend survived the shooting and describes the 2 suspects as men in their early 20s. One had long hair and a ponytail, the other wore his hair in twists. We started the spotlight by asking, where's the justice? Well, sometimes the answer comes too late. That story next. The theme of our show tonight, justice delayed is justice denied. And no one understood that better than Vianne Falcon, who watched for almost 3 decades for a suspect to be named in the 1994 slayings of her daughter Stacy and her 3-year-old grandson Jacob. After years of frustration, the Spotlight's Jennifer Lee says the case took a dramatic turn thanks to long-delayed DNA matches.
I've been at my breaking point for a very long time.
According to court documents, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab detected DNA evidence on Stacy through an oral swab and fingernail clippings that matched a man named Jerome Jones. Falcon says she didn't know DNA evidence existed until many years later in 2019 through a local Seattle Times journalist.
We were flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe it that they had all that time to get a hold of any one of us. and let us know, and they hadn't contacted anybody.
The 51-year-old suspect is currently behind bars in a California state prison for shooting a man to death in March of 1995, which is just months after allegedly killing Stacy and Jacob in Washington state. Court documents say a number of additional evidence items were submitted and resubmitted over the years, given advances in DNA identification.
Because it's pretty embarrassing for them to have sat on this DNA for 18 years and not done anything.
In December 2021, investigators learned DNA evidence was also found on the jacket of Falcon's 3-year-old grandson.
I'm so embarrassed when I go up to the gravesite. I told her I'd have some good news for her. Well, that was like 15, 20 years ago. And now I do have good news for her.
Jones, who claims to have never met Vianne's daughter, was scheduled to be arraigned for the double murder back in February. But he's still in California pending an appeal on his case there. The King County Prosecutor's Office tells the Spotlight they are continuing to press for extradition back here to Washington State. But any hearing will come too late for Vianne. We're sorry to report she passed away this summer. So this episode is dedicated to her memory. That's all the time we have on the Spotlight. Until next time, be smart and stay safe.